I gave my son a brand new SUV for his birthday, fully paid off, title in his name. 10 minutes later, he handed me a drink tray and said, "Tip the help, my mom's tonight's server." Everyone laughed. I didn't. It wasn't a joke. It was a distraction from what he'd already stolen from me. 1 month later, I invited him to dinner and did something he'll never forget. Before we begin, make sure to like and subscribe, and please tell me and others, what's one life lesson everyone should hear before it's too late? Share it in the comments below. Thanks. I gave him the keys like it was a second chance. A brand new black Ford Bronco parked out front with a red bow so bright it looked fake against the Arizona dust. I saved 5 years for that thing. Every holiday bonus, every overshift at the grocery store, every scrap I could cut from my own bills. He used to point at that exact car when he was 16, back when we shared frozen dinners and a single fan in a 2-bedroom rental. "Someday," he'd say, and I'd nod like maybe someday would actually come. And here I was, 62 years old, tired in my bones, giving my only child a $62,000 dream with a title in his name. I didn't expect tears. I didn't expect a scene, just maybe a moment, something like pride. But Nathan barely glanced at it. He hugged me quick, one arm, no eye contact, already looking over my shoulder at his friends pulling up in Teslas and Range Rovers. His girlfriend Carly strutted across the lawn in heels, lips tight like she smelled something cheap. The house was a rental, one of those Airbnb mansions in Paradise Valley, and it was packed. Caterers, DJs, people I didn't know. I brought a casserole just in case. Habit, but Nathan waved it off like I'd embarrassed him. "Mom, just chill, everything's taken care of," he said, then leaned in, fake whispering loud enough for his group to hear. "Actually, you can help me out real quick." He grabbed a silver drink tray off a table, shoved it into my hands, and spun me toward the guests. "Everyone, meet our waitress for the night," he said, smirking like it was hilarious. "Please tip her, she raised me right." They laughed, loud, some clapped. I stood there with the tray in my hands, plastic, cup wobbling, heart pounding, smile frozen like my face forgot how to move. And he just walked off. Carly mouthed something to one of her friends. I didn't catch it, but they laughed too. I took the tray to the edge of the patio, set it down, and kept moving like nothing happened. My knees shook. I didn't cry. Not then. I just kept walking. Into the house, through the fake modern kitchen, into a bathroom with a gold faucet and folded towels. I locked the door, sat on the toilet lid, and stared at the floor like it owed me an answer. That's when I heard it. Voices through the vent. Carly's clear as a bell. "She didn't even ask. Told you the car would shut her up." Another voice, Nathan's, low and annoyed. "Still need the other paper signed. She's dragging it out." Carly again. "Just get her to dinner next week. She'll cave." I didn't breathe, didn't blink, didn't move until they were gone. When I stood up, I felt different. Not broken, not even angry yet. Just done. I rinsed my face, wiped my cheeks, checked my makeup like none of it mattered, and walked out smiling. I found my casserole in the kitchen trash, untouched. I left it there. On my way out, I passed the Bronco again. It gleamed. The bow was crooked now. I didn't touch it, didn't look back, just drove home, turned off my phone, and poured a glass of wine I didn't want. My hand shook the whole time, because that wasn't just a humiliation. That was something else, a performance, a distraction. And if I knew my son, and I did, he didn't do anything that bold without a reason. Something was coming. I just didn't know what yet, but I was going to find out. I didn't sleep that night, not even a minute. I kept going over what I'd heard through that vent, Carly's voice playing on loop in my head like some sick bedtime story. "She didn't even ask. Told you the car would shut her up." That wasn't just cruelty, that was calculation. And I knew my son could be careless, selfish even, but this wasn't that. This was planning. I got up at 4:30 a.m., made coffee. I didn't drink, and sat at my tiny kitchen table staring at my old lockbox, the one I hadn't opened in years. Inside were my most important documents, my birth certificate, Nathan's, my divorce papers, my father's will, and one deed, one single-page title that proved I still owned the old house he left me, the one Nathan used to call Grandpa's. Haunted shack. I kept it in my name all these years because it was the only thing I had left from my family, and I figured if I ever needed to sell it for emergency money, I could. But when I looked in the box, the deed wasn't there. I tore the place apart. Every file drawer, every envelope, every junk folder stuffed with tax receipts and expired coupons. Nothing. At 9 a.m., I called the Maricopa County Assessor's office. I told the clerk I was checking the current record for a property I owned. He asked for the parcel number. I didn't have it, just the address. He looked it up and paused. It shows transfer of ownership, he said, to a business LLC. I asked for the name. Omnicore Investments, he said. Transfer happened 6 weeks ago. My mouth went dry. I asked who signed the transfer. He read the name. Mine. Was this notarized? I asked. Yes, he said. Your brother, David Monroe. I hung up before I screamed. David, who I hadn't spoken to in over a decade, who had borrowed money from me 3 times and never paid me back, who once told Nathan at a funeral that I was a control freak. That David. I grabbed my phone and opened my messages, scrolled to Nathan's last text from 2 weeks ago. Dinner soon? I replied now. Yes, let's talk. My hands were still shaking. I called Tasha next. She answered on the first ring. I'm getting a weird feeling, I said. She didn't even ask what happened, just said, I'm already putting on pants. 20 minutes later, she was in my kitchen, flipping through my papers, trying not to curse too loud. You think they forged your signature? She asked. Or tricked you while you were doped up on meds? I blinked. That's surgery. The eye one. The paperwork Nathan brought over that day in April, when he said, Mom, just sign this real quick for insurance stuff. I didn't even look. I was still groggy from anesthesia. I signed 5 or 6 pages without reading. I think they used that moment, I whispered. They got me when I was weak. Tasha didn't say anything for a full minute. Then she said, We need to get mean. She pulled out her old laptop and started digging into public records. Omnicore Investments had one listed officer, Carly Ortega. It wasn't even hidden. I felt like I'd been slapped. So the car wasn't a gift, it was hush money. A flashy red bow to keep my mouth shut while they stole from me. They didn't think I'd notice. Worse, they didn't think I'd fight back. That's when I decided I wasn't just going to confront them. I was going to destroy the entire thing, clean, cold, and in public. But not yet. First, I needed proof. Not just guesses, not just vent whispers and gut feelings. I needed to catch them planning it, executing it, denying it, on tape, on text, on something I could hold in court or shove in their faces at the right moment. I needed to hear Nathan say it out loud, and if I knew my son, all it would take was one fake dinner, a few drinks, and one subtle push to make him show his cards. The boy never could resist bragging when he thought he'd won, so I made my plan. Set the trap, and this time I was the one watching from the hallway. I spent the next 3 days playing dumb, smiling at Nathan's texts, acting like everything was normal, while my brain ran at full sprint trying to plug every hole they could slip through. I went back through old emails, looked for any digital trail of that property transfer. Anything that proved they used my post-surgery signature without consent. Nothing showed up. The only files Carly had emailed me were labeled medical claims and insurance disclosures, and the attachments looked bland enough that I wouldn't have questioned them even if I was fully awake when I signed. It was a perfect play. Wait until I was weak, tuck the forged deed into a stack of real medical forms, get me to sign, then file it under a shell company nobody would trace unless they really knew what to look for. I started a notebook, wrote down every interaction, date, and phrase I could remember. She didn't even ask. Still need the paper signed. Get her to dinner next week. Each line, each piece of that overheard bathroom conversation turned into evidence. I cross-checked the LLC name again, Omnicore Investments, and found out it had only been formed 2 months ago, registered through an Arizona online legal service, no business address, no website. But the registration agent? Carly Ortega. Her full name, plain as day. That gave me enough to confirm this wasn't just some impulsive cash grab. This was a plan, structured, built, filed, executed. And now I was the fool funding the getaway car with a big red bow on top. I made copies of everything I could find: emails, screenshots, property lookups, business records, and put them in a folder I labeled Final. Then I did what I swore I wouldn't. I called David. He didn't answer the first 3 times, but on the 4th ring, he picked up with a fake cheery voice that made my stomach clench. "Well, look who it is. My favorite big sister," he said, like we were still kids playing in Grandpa's yard. "Save it," I snapped. "You notarized a fraudulent property transfer under my name, David. I didn't sign anything knowingly. You know it. I know it. And now you're going to tell me why you helped my son steal from me." He was silent for a second. Then, "It was Nathan's idea. He said you were giving him the house, that you just didn't want to deal with the legal stuff yourself. He told me it was all arranged." "And you believed that?" I hissed. "Without calling me? Without checking?" He started to stammer something about taxes and how Carly had a spreadsheet that made it all make sense, but I cut him off. "You knew I was recovering from surgery. You knew I was vulnerable. You knew damn well I wouldn't just hand over Dad's house like it was a bottle of ketchup." He didn't argue, just sighed. "I needed the notarizing fee," he mumbled. "Rent's been tough." That was it. He sold out our family name for a couple $100. I hung up without another word. Tasha came over that night with takeout and a cheap bottle of wine. She sat across from me at the kitchen table, watching me organize everything into manila folders like I was preparing for trial. "You really gonna do this?" she asked. I nodded. "I'm going to invite them all to dinner. Nathan, Carly, David. I'm going to feed them like family, and then I'm going to bury them like enemies." She grinned, raised her glass, and said, "Well then, let's make sure the main course is scorched earth." We stayed up until 2 a.m., printing, sorting, highlighting. The last thing I did before bed was pull out the last photo I had of my dad, the day he signed that deed over to me in the driveway of the old house. He had grease on his shirt and a beer in his hand, and he smiled like he was finally proud of something he built. I touched his face in the photo and said out loud, "Don't worry, I'll fix this. I'm not letting them take what you left. Me." Then I turned out the light and started counting down the days until dinner. I didn't expect to get lucky that fast, but sometimes the truth slips out when you're not even trying to hear it. Tasha was the one who caught it, an old voicemail she almost deleted thinking it was spam. She played it out loud in the break room at work, half listening until Nathan's voice came through clear as day saying, "Once she signs the rest, it's done. I don't care if she figures it out later. Carly said she'll spin it like a tax move or something." Then a pause, followed by Carly's voice faint in the background. "Just keep smiling. She's still soft from the car." That hit me like a truck, soft from the car. Like the Bronco was a bribe. Like all those years I spent scraping and saving were a setup for them to run off with my legacy while I stood there smiling like a damn idiot. I had Tasha forward it to me, then saved it in 3 places: my phone, a flash drive, and an encrypted folder. My hands were shaking as I labeled the file. Proof. That voicemail changed everything. It wasn't just emotional now. It was legal. It was fraud, manipulation, and conspiracy, and I had their voices proving it. But more than that, it was the final nail in whatever idea I still had about Nathan being reachable, fixable, still mine. That wasn't my son talking on that message. That was a thief, a snake. And if he could talk about me like I was some gullible obstacle to step over, then he'd already made his choice. The funeral was just delayed. I spent the next day printing transcripts, building timelines, tracking paper trails. I even called a friend of Tasha's who used to work in real estate law, just to make sure I wasn't imagining the fraud angle. She confirmed it. If I didn't knowingly sign those documents and they were slipped into unrelated paperwork while I was medicated, it was a textbook abuse of power and potentially criminal. I wanted to scream, cry, break something, but I didn't. I just kept working. There was no room for emotion now, only strategy. That night, I sat in bed staring at the ceiling, listening to the voicemail again with earbuds in. I memorized every word, every pause, every smug little breath. And by the 4th replay, I wasn't angry anymore. I was focused, cold. I realized I didn't just want them exposed. I wanted them exposed in a way they couldn't spin or undo or walk back from. I wanted it public, undeniable, and permanent. That's when I started planning the dinner. Not a confrontation in a lawyer's office, not a private scolding behind closed doors. No, I wanted them surrounded by the people who used to believe they were good. Family, friends, people who watched Nathan grow up, who saw me pour myself into him year after year. I wanted every lie to collapse in real time. Tasha was in before I even finished the sentence. "We'll need cameras," she said. "You've got a Ring doorbell, but that won't cut it. We'll hide a couple GoPros in the light fixtures." She was calm, casual, like she'd done this before. And honestly, maybe she had. Tasha had been through more betrayals than most. People could stomach, and she didn't flinch anymore. We picked a date, 3 weeks out. I invited Nathan the next day, texted Carly directly too, just to be sure. "Dinner at my place, family only, just like old times." They replied with fake excitement. "Can't wait!" Nathan even added a heart emoji. I stared at it for 5 minutes, thinking about how many times I'd mistaken his smiles for sincerity, how often I'd chalked up his distance to stress or busyness or growing pains. But now I knew better. He hadn't drifted. He'd been drifting. With purpose. And I'd been too damn trusting to see it. I started practicing what I'd say, in the mirror, in the car, out loud to myself while folding laundry. I pictured Carly's face when I played the voicemail, David's panic when I handed him the notarization timeline, Nathan's silence when I looked him dead in the eye and told him he wasn't my son anymore. The fantasy played out 100 different ways, but in every version, I won. Not with screaming, not with revenge, with facts, calm fury, and a public reset they couldn't recover from. That voicemail wasn't just a mistake on their part, it was a gift, and I was going to use it to flip the whole damn table. It happened on a Tuesday afternoon, 1 week after I sent the dinner invite. Nathan showed up at my door unannounced, holding a grocery store bouquet and wearing the same nervous grin he used to pull when he broke something as a kid and didn't want to get grounded. I opened the door and let him in without a word, mostly because I wanted to see how far he'd go. He walked in like he owned the place, set the flowers on the counter like they erased everything, and said, "Mom, I've been doing a lot of thinking." He gave me that look he thinks still works, the half-sincere, half-calculated one, like he's performing humility more than feeling it. "I know I messed up," he continued. "The party, that wasn't cool. I thought it'd come off as funny, but I crossed a line." I didn't say anything. I just nodded and motioned for him to sit. He sat at the kitchen table where he used to do homework 25 years ago, and for a second, I could almost pretend he was still that kid, the one who used to ask me how to spell embarrassed and never wanted to go to sleep unless I checked the closet for monsters. But that kid was gone. I poured him coffee and sat across from him, hands folded, playing calm. He launched into a full performance, talking about how he's been caught up in work, how Carly has been pressuring him about growing up, and how he feels disconnected from his roots. It was a symphony of buzzwords, no specifics, just a blurry watercolor of regret painted to look like an apology. "I want to fix things," he said, eyes locked on mine. "That's why I think dinner's a great idea. We can reset, start fresh, just you and me." I smiled and said, "That's all I want too." He left with a hug that felt more like a silent pat-down, and as soon as the door shut, I grabbed my phone and texted Tasha. He took the bait. What Nathan didn't know was that I had my phone recording the entire conversation in my apron pocket, not for court, not even for evidence, just for me, to play back later and remind myself that none of it was real. 2 nights later, the cracks showed. Carly called my landline, she never calls, and left a voicemail meant for Nathan. She must have mixed up the numbers, and that mistake gave me everything I needed. Her voice was sharp, clipped, no pretense. She bought it. "Dinner's happening. Make sure you bring the rest of the paperwork this time. David said he needs her signature on that last clause before the title moves clean." My blood went cold. The fake apology, the flowers, the coffee talk, it was all a setup to finish what they started. They thought if they softened me up, I'd sign one last time, smile through the backstab, and sleepwalk into losing the last thing I owned that had any worth. But what they didn't know was that I was already 5 steps ahead. I saved Carly's Voicemail, added it to my evidence folder, and spent that weekend installing 3 discrete mini cameras in my dining room. Tasha handled the tech. She mounted one in a faux plant, one in a hanging light fixture, and one behind a vent grate. We tested each angle, checked audio clarity, and made sure they were motion activated. No wires, no blinking lights, nothing to catch the eye. Just silent little eyes watching everything. I also bought 2 extra dining chairs so there'd be nowhere to hide when the confrontation hit. I even printed out a seating chart. Nathan across from me, Carly to his left, David beside her. I wanted them boxed in, with no one to run to when I dropped the hammer. By Sunday, I had the entire folder tabbed and labeled: deed transfer, business registry, voicemails, timeline of my surgery, notarization log, signatures compared. The whole thing was tighter than a courtroom exhibit. I'd planned 100 dinners in that house over the years, birthdays, graduations, Sunday meals just because. But this one was different. This one wasn't about food. This was war, dressed up as family, and they had no idea they were walking into their own eulogy. I cleaned my house with the same intensity people use to stage crime scenes. Every surface scrubbed, every corner cleared, not because I cared what they thought, but because I wanted the setup to look perfect, controlled, like the calm before a very personal storm. The table was set for 6, me at the head, Nathan and Carly side by side across from me, David next to Carly, Tasha at the far end as my anchor, and one empty chair just to keep them wondering. I used my mother's old linen tablecloth, the one we only brought out on holidays, and I laid out the plates like I was preparing a peace offering instead of a trap. The folder of documents sat hidden inside a hollowed-out cookbook on the counter. The cameras were already tested and live, and I had a backup audio recorder tucked into the base of a flower vase, dead center on the table. Tasha came early, helped me plate up the food: roast chicken, scalloped potatoes, green beans with bacon. And even though we both knew no one would taste the thing once the truth came out, it mattered to me that they couldn't say I didn't host them like family one. Last time, Nathan showed up first, wearing a button-up shirt like he was playing a character he didn't believe in, flashing me that politician smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. Carly came in behind him, fake laughing, wine bottle in hand like she thought it bought her charm. David dragged in last, smelling faintly like old sweat and bourbon gum, eyes darting around like he already sensed something was off. I greeted them warmly, took their jackets, poured drinks, made small talk like I didn't already have the end of this story written. We sat down just as the sun dipped low enough to paint the dining room in soft gold, the kind of lighting that makes people lower their guard. We toasted to family, and I held back the bile in my throat long enough to clink glasses. The first 10 minutes were tight-lipped, forced compliments about the house, the food, the weather. I let them talk, watched Carly steer every conversation back to future plans, investments, growth opportunities, like she was selling something to a slow investor. David stayed mostly quiet, sipping his wine too fast, eyes not meeting mine. Nathan kept glancing at Carly like he needed her approval to breathe. I waited until the plates were half empty, until the wine dulled their reflexes just enough, and then I smiled, stood up and said, "Before dessert, I have a little something I'd like us all to do together, just a small activity to wrap up the evening." Nathan laughed nervously. Carly raised an eyebrow. I walked to the counter, pulled the hollowed cookbook from the shelf, and opened it. One by one, I handed each of them a sealed envelope. They looked confused at first, then curious, then cautious. "What's this?" Carly asked, her voice suddenly thinner. "A thank you," I said. "From me to you. Go ahead. Open them." They did. And as the papers unfolded, so did their faces. Carly's mouth twitched. Nathan blinked like he was trying to erase what he was reading. David just stared blankly like he'd seen a ghost. Inside each envelope was a complete copy of my evidence: transcripts, screenshots, voicemail quotes, public filings, notarization logs, everything. Then I sat down and folded my hands. "I know what you did," I said. "I know how you did it. And I know who helped you. And I didn't invite you here tonight for an apology. I invited you to let you know this is the last meal you'll ever have with me as a family. Carly snapped first, trying to bluff. This doesn't prove anything, she said. This is all circumstantial. I didn't even look at her. I looked at Nathan. You used my trust, my vulnerability, and my name to steal from me, I said. You used my brother to make it legal, and you used that car to distract me. You played me like a mark. But here's the thing. You did it. All on camera. Every word, every lie, every fake apology. You didn't cover your tracks. You made a trail, and now it's mine. He said nothing. Not a word. Just stared at the folder like he was waiting for it to burst into flames and disappear. I stood again and reached for the final item, a small flash drive in a clear case, and placed it in the middle of the table. This has the footage from tonight, I said. All of it. You won't stop me from using it, and if you even try, I'll make sure every person who ever shook your hand sees who you really are. No one touched their drinks after that. No one finished their plates. No one made eye contact when I walked out of the room and left them there, silent, choking on everything they thought they'd gotten away with. I could have ended it right there. Could have walked back into the dining room, collected the plates, and let the silence suffocate them. But that wouldn't have finished what they started. Not until I said it out loud. Not until I gave words to what they'd already made true. I stood just outside the room for a few seconds, letting the weight of the moment settle in, letting them squirm under the spotlight of their own guilt. And when I stepped back in, I didn't bother sitting. I stood at the head of the table, hands at my sides, not angry, not loud, just done. Nathan looked up at me like a scolded teenager, eyes searching my face for softness, for forgiveness, for some crack in the armor he could still crawl through. Carly sat stiff, arms crossed, trying to pretend she had control, and David just stared at his empty glass like maybe if he wished hard enough, he could disappear into it. I cleared my throat and said, I've thought a lot about what to say here, how to explain what you took from me, but the truth is, you didn't just take a house, or a deed, or some numbers on a piece of paper. You took me. You hollowed out. The last real thing I had left, the last piece of my father, of my name, of what I built from nothing. And you did it while smiling, while calling me Mom. I looked directly at Nathan and waited for him to meet my eyes. And when he did, I saw no child in him, no trace of the boy I raised. It was just a man I didn't recognize. So, here's what I'm taking back, I said, voice steady. I'm taking back my name, my boundaries, and any illusion that blood automatically means love. As of tonight, I don't consider you my son. You are not my family. You are not my legacy. You are just a man who stole from a woman who would have died for him. He blinked hard, like maybe if he stared long enough, I'd take it back. I didn't. Carly, I hope you got everything you wanted out of this, I added, turning to her. Because what you've taken can't be returned, and what you've ruined can't be cleaned up with wine and fake smiles. And David? I turned to my brother. You were dead to me a long time ago. This just makes it official. No one spoke. No one moved. The air was thick with failure, with exposed truth, with the unraveling of every secret they thought they buried deep enough. I reached under the table, pulled out the last printed folder, an official letter from my attorney stating the revocation of all inheritance rights, a cease and desist notice regarding any use of my name or property, and notice of intent to file for fraud investigation with attached documentation. I placed it in front of Nathan. This goes into effect immediately. You will not receive $1 from me now or ever. You will not speak for me. You will not speak about me. You will not show up to my funeral. You are a stranger. Then I turned and walked out of the dining room, out of my own home, onto the front porch where the night air hit me like freedom. I stood there listening. Not a single voice behind me. No footsteps, no begging, no apologies. Just silence. The kind that says they knew I meant every word. That was the night I buried a son, not with a casket or a tombstone, but with the truth and a stack of receipts. I posted the footage the same night, not out of spite, but survival. Because if I didn't control the story, they would, and I wasn't about to let the people who humiliated me in front of strangers also rewrite the ending. I uploaded it anonymously. Using a burner account Tasha helped me create, clipped it tight. No fluff, no context, just pure betrayal in their own words. The video opened with Nathan joking at his party, then cut straight to Carly's voicemail, then to the audio of their dinner conversation where they never once denied what they did, just tried to downplay it, and finally ended with my voice, saying, "You are not my son anymore. We didn't even add music. We didn't need to. The internet did the rest." By morning, it had 3,000 shares on Facebook. By lunch, it hit 20,000 on TikTok. And by dinner, it made local news under the headline, "Mother disowns son after he steals her house and throws her under the bus." Strangers flooded the comments, some crying, some angry, some tagging their own kids with captions like, "Watch your back." It spread like fire. I watched it happen from my phone in bed, one tab open on the video, the other on my email, where reporters and podcast hosts were already asking for interviews. I ignored them all. I wasn't doing this for fame. I just wanted the truth to live somewhere it couldn't be deleted. By the end of the week, Nathan's HVAC company was hit with one-star reviews calling him a liar, a thief, an ungrateful coward. Carly's real estate license was suspended pending investigation after someone emailed the clip to the state board, along with public record screenshots showing the forged deed transfer. David went dark. No social media, no responses, nothing. A ghost. I guess even cockroaches know when to hide. Nathan sent one message 3 days later. "Please call me. I didn't know it would get this far." I read it. I deleted it. Because it was never about how far it went. It was about how far they were willing to take me down before I noticed. My voicemail filled with strangers, most saying thank you, a few asking for advice. One woman sobbing about her own son who emptied her savings without her knowing. And that's when I realized I wasn't the only one. I wasn't rare. I was just the one who spoke up. Tasha printed out the best comments and taped them to my fridge like war medals. "Hero mom," one said. "This woman needs a Netflix deal," said another. We laughed about it, but under the laughter, I knew something had shifted for good. Not just in my relationship with Nathan, but in me. I had spent decades shrinking myself to fit inside the image of what a good mother looked like, quiet, giving, forgiving to a fault, but now I didn't owe anyone silence. Not anymore. The house was still mine, the title restored thanks to the legal documents I'd pre-filed the same day as dinner, and Nathan had officially been served notice through his lawyer that he was to make no further claims on my estate or property, or I'd pursue felony fraud charges. I wasn't bluffing. I'd rather spend my last breath in court than let him steal from me again. Carly, to her credit, tried one more Hail Mary, sent me a message with some half-hearted apology and a note saying, "We all make mistakes." I replied once, "Mistakes are accidents. You planned yours." Then I blocked her. The internet doesn't stay mad forever, and I knew the attention would fade, but I didn't care about views or likes. What mattered was that the truth had a timestamp now. A record they couldn't scrub clean. And even if people moved on, even if they forgot my name, Nathan and Carly would never be able to escape that dinner table moment where everything they built on lies got burned to the ground in front of their own reflection. That was the justice I needed. Not revenge, clarity, closure, control, the things they thought I'd never get back. He showed up 2 months later. No warning, no text. Just a knock at the door like he'd forgotten the weight of what he'd done. Like maybe if he stood there long enough with his eyes sunken and his shirt wrinkled, I'd forget too. I saw him, through the peephole, and didn't move at first, just stood behind the door holding my breath, deciding whether I was going to let him in or let the past stay where it belonged, outside. But something in me needed to look him in the eye one last time, needed to see if the man who betrayed me could even pretend to be the boy I raised. I opened the door. He looked smaller, not physically, but hollow, like whatever armor he used to wear had rusted off. "Hi, Mom," he said, voice soft, strained, the way someone speaks when they know they've already lost, but don't know how to say it out loud. I didn't say anything. I just stepped aside. He walked in slow, hands in his pockets, eyes scanning the living room like he was walking through a crime scene he didn't recognize. I offered him coffee, not out of kindness, but ritual. If I was going to bury this properly, I needed to see it through. We sat at the table in silence until he finally said, "I don't even know who I am anymore." I looked at him, really, looked at him, and for a second I felt a flicker of sympathy, not for the man he was, but for the pieces of the boy he used to be, scattered beneath everything he'd built on top of me. He started crying, quiet at first, then full body shaking, the kind of sobs that come from somewhere deeper than guilt, more like grief. "I didn't mean to hurt you like that," he said. "Carly had all these plans, and I thought if I could just get that house, flip it, get the cash, we'd be set. I wasn't thinking. I was stupid. I was scared." I let him talk. Let him unravel every excuse, every confession, every pitiful reach for redemption. And when he was done, I said, "You weren't scared. You were selfish. You didn't make a mistake. You made a plan. You just thought I was too old, too soft, too stupid to catch you." He winced, but didn't deny it. "I don't expect you to forgive me," he said, eyes on the table. "I just wanted to say sorry. I don't know what else to do." I looked at him and saw a man who wanted the pain to be over, not because he felt it, but because he couldn't stand the weight of being seen as the villain. "There's nothing else to do," I said. "You already did it. And you're right, I don't forgive you. But I don't hate you either. I just don't know you anymore. And you don't know me." He looked up, searching for something in my face, maybe mercy, maybe memory, but I didn't offer either. I stood up and walked to the front door. He followed. No more words. I opened it, stepped aside, and as he passed, I placed my hand lightly on his shoulder, not as a mother, not as a farewell, but as a mark, a quiet acknowledgement that this chapter was closed. He stepped outside, turned like he might say something else, but I shut the door before he could, leaned against it, and let the silence settle in like peace. Not the kind that comes from resolution, but the kind that comes when you finally stop waiting for someone to be who they used to be. It took 3 more weeks of legal cleanup to fully transfer the house back into my name, to clear the fraudulent paperwork, and file the final affidavits. But when the county sent the updated title deed with my name printed clean and bold across the top, I sat on the floor and held it in my lap like a newborn. It didn't make me happy. Not the gloating kind of happy people imagine. It made me quiet, steady, resolved. The house wasn't about money. It never had been. It was my father's sweat in the foundation, my childhood birthdays in the living room, my mother's chipped teacups in the cabinets, and somehow it had become the last battlefield in a war I didn't know I was in until I was almost too late. I moved in quietly. No announcement, no celebration, just a rented truck, and Tasha with a box of cinnamon rolls and a Bluetooth speaker blasting old Dolly Parton songs while we unpacked. The inside smelled like dust and forgotten years, but it was mine again. I painted the kitchen walls a soft yellow, replaced the busted blinds in the front room, and pulled the dead weeds from the side yard until my hands ached. There was something holy in the work, in fixing what others tried to discard. I turned the second bedroom into a spare room for women who needed a place to land. Women like me, older, tired, forgotten by their own kids, or pushed out by silence and guilt. I called it The Nest, a name that felt safe and small, but full of meaning. And by the 3rd month, I already had 2 women sleeping under my roof and helping me keep the place running. I didn't advertise it, didn't apply for grants. I just did it, quietly, like planting seeds and waiting. One day, Tasha handed me a package that came in the mail. Inside was a key, the one to the Bronco I'd given Nathan, with a note that just said, "I left it at your curb. I didn't know what else to do. I never went outside to check." I don't know if the car was really there or if he just needed a symbolic gesture, but I mounted that key on the wall in the entryway beside a small wood plaque. I burned myself with an old soldering tool. It read, "She wasn't just the help." People noticed it when they walked in. Some asked what it meant, some didn't. I didn't explain. That wasn't their story to carry. Every Sunday, I walked through each room and touched the walls with my hand, like reminding the house that it was safe again, that no one would rip it from under us, that it would never be weaponized against love again. Sometimes I got letters from people who saw the video, strangers thanking me for doing what they couldn't, for saying what they weren't allowed to. A few came from women who whispered into their phones that they'd cut their own sons off. 2, and they wanted to know what came after. I always wrote back, "You start over. That's what comes next. You build from the quiet up." The story never really ended, but it closed. And sometimes closure isn't about justice or vengeance. It's about reclaiming your own damn name and putting it back on the front door. Mine is Evelyn Monroe. I am 62 years old. I am not anyone's waitress, anyone's fool, or anyone's fallback plan. I am the woman who was left, laughed at, and nearly erased, and I am still standing. This house, this key, these walls, they are mine, and I am whole again.